What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside of Hartford, Connecticut. And today we are going to be continuing our Rant series. And this episode we'll be looking at the NHL's Atlantic Division. Now, the Atlantic Division is going to be a two-part episode. This episode is going to have three teams discussed. We're going to look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Ottawa Senators. Now, if you're wondering why there's only 7 teams that we're going to be discussing, one of the teams in the Atlantic, the 8th team, the Boston Bruins, already has their own rant video that has been out since February. Definitely check that one out if you're curious why I hate the Bruins. But without further ado, let's jump right in and discuss the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, Toronto Maple Leafs. Ty Domi fights a fan. So, Ty Domi was one of the best enforcers in the NHL in the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s in particular. So, Domi was great at getting under people's skin. Of course, the Flyers were the Broad Street Bullies. Now, that was a couple decades before, but they still were known for their nitty-gritty players, even in the 90s and 2000s. So Domi had no problem fighting players on the Flyers. Obviously, when you get in a fight, you go to the penalty box. So Domi goes to the penalty box in the game in Philadelphia, and the fans are obviously talking trash. I mean, come on. It's the team's biggest enforcer. He always fights your guys. Of course you're going to say something. So Domi, as a response, takes a water bottle and starts squirting it at the fans. So one Flyers fan takes exception to this, and he tries to, leap at the glass and kind of say, give me a shot at him. And then Domi squirts the water back at him, and then the plexiglass breaks, or caves in, I should say. So all of a sudden, the fans in the penalty box with Ty Domi, the ref comes in and kind of tries to break it apart, but Domi gets a few solid punches in before the refs restrain Domi from the fan. Of course, this infamous history moment in NHL history had to happen in Philadelphia with a Flyers fan, but Ty Domi was just a dirty player. Obviously, different era today versus then, but it goes to show you what Ty Domi did, how Ty Domi played, and the fact that he was on Toronto makes it that much worse for Toronto, at least, in my opinion. The next one is when Mikhail Grabovski ends Chris Pronger's career. No ill will towards Grabovski. I know he didn't intentionally do this, but it's just something that I'll always remember, and it's always going to be tied in my mind to the Maple Leafs. I remember I was watching this game. I was younger, so I was kind of half watching it, half doing my own thing. And Grabovski, his stick kind of comes up. Both him and Pronger are going for a puck. And Grabovski's stick comes up and hits Pronger in the eye. So prior to this incident, Pronger was already dealing with post-concussion syndrome. So he was already dealing with, concussion problems like bad, iffy vision and everything like that. And a hit to the eye all but ended his career. It made it so he has bad peripheral vision in his right eye, I believe it was, even to this day. And it made him have to retire. At that time, that was when I really started getting into hockey. It was during the captaincy of Chris Pronger. This was a year or two after the Stanley Cup run in 09-10. So I remember that game. I remember it. It's just, again, no ill will towards Grabovski. It's just this happened to happen with Toronto. This would have been an incident I would have discussed no matter what team it was. James Van Riemsdyk. So JVR, he's not, I don't hate Van Riemsdyk. Obviously, he's currently a Flyer today, but it's the fact that they traded him to Toronto for defenseman Luke Schenn. So this is a second case against the, Grabovski thing. When Pronger's career ended, the Flyers needed a defenseman to fill the void, so they traded for Luke Schenn. And to get Schenn, they had to trade James Van Riemsdyk. So, obviously, Luke Schenn coming to Philly reunited him with Braden Schenn, his brother, but it wasn't a great move for the Flyers. Luke Schenn really stunk up the place in Philadelphia. James Van Riemsdyk broke out in Toronto, and it goes to show you. And then Van Riemsdyk signed this big deal with the Flyers a couple years back in the offseason. He hasn't lived up to the expectations. So everything to do with Van Riemsdyk just seems to hurt the Flyers. Lastly, constant disappointment / losing to Boston. Oh boy. So obviously, Toronto hasn't won a Stanley Cup since 1967. That's disappointing. But if you talk to their fans, you wouldn't think so. They're all talk. All they do is talk about how great their team is. All you gotta say is, okay, hey, speaking of, were you live last time your team won a Stanley Cup? No? And of course, they've had a lot of recent years, they just keep losing in the playoffs, they keep losing in the first round. They have all this hope, and then they just lose right away. Recently, that includes losing to Boston in the first round of the playoffs multiple times. It's just, why does it have to be Boston is my question. But constant disappointment, and of course losing to Boston in the first round, you can't get much worse than that. Except maybe losing to Pittsburgh. Tampa Bay Lightning. The fact that team fans gave them the nickname of Champa Bay, it's not creative, it's dumb. Look, I understand, Tampa Bay's doing great right now. Good for them. But anytime you're tied with Tom Brady, I want nothing to do with you. So yes, I did root for the Lightning in the 2019-2020 Stanley Cup Final. I will not deny that. But if the shoe were on the other foot and Tampa Bay was in the final against Dallas right now, I would be rooting for Dallas. And that's simply because if you're tied with Tom Brady, and if you have that stupid nickname, something that Brady's tied to, I want nothing to do with it. 1-3-1 formation. So Tampa Bay, under their coach, I believe it was Guy Boucher at that time, tried this stupid 1-3-1 formation. So this is what it looked like. Rather than your typical 2-2-1 or 3-2, most teams run a 3-2, 3 forwards, 2 defensemen. They had this 1 forward, 3 mid, and then 1 defenseman. And what the Flyers end up doing with that is they say, okay, so what the Flyers did is they get the puck right off the faceoff, and they decide to have one player, they have 2 players on their defense going in, staying in their zone. And of course, Tampa Bay is only sending 1 guy out there. So 1 guy cannot cover 2, and they know that. So it stalled time. The fans started booing it. Obviously, it was in Tampa Bay when it happened. It made a mockery of the game. The Lightning there, that was just a mockery of the game. Giving Philly Vincent Lecavalier. So obviously, they didn't give him away to Philadelphia. They cut him. And Vincent Lecavalier, when he came to Philly, he stunk. He was old. I don't know why the Flyers gave him that big contract. Obviously, this is more a knock on the Flyers than it is the Maple Leafs, or the Lightning, the Lightning. But look, Lecavalier was good in his prime, but by the time he came to Philly, he stunk. And it just really upset me that, of course, he went to Philadelphia. So it's something that I'll remember that for Tampa Bay. He was great at one point, but when he came to Philly, he wasn't. And, the hope was up when he came to Philadelphia, too. So I was all excited. I'm like, oh, this will be great. We're going to have a good player. Nope. Lastly, Florida does not need 2 teams. Okay? Florida does not need 2 teams. Now, I'm going to go more in detail on this in part 2 when we talk about the Florida Panthers. But I'm sorry, Florida does not need 2 teams. They can support the Lightning. But this will be more in part 2. Lastly, we have the Ottawa Senators. Brady Tkachuk. You guys know I don't like Brady Tkachuk. He's a bigger baby than Cindy Crosby. I cannot stand Crosby. Captain Concussion is a big baby. All he does is cry. And then I watch the Flyers play the Senators. Tkachuk does the exact same thing. And then he thinks, oh, I can fight. No, you can't. You don't know how to fight. Your dad could fight. Your brother can fight. You're just a baby. Tkachuk is just a baby. Brady Tkachuk is a baby. It also doesn't help that his first name is Brady. But Tkachuk basically, he'll be playing the Flyers, or he'll be playing anybody, and Tkachuk will grab the opponent's stick, and he'll pull it away from him for a couple seconds, and the second the ref looks, he drops it, plays dumb. And then 20 seconds later in the same shift, that same opponent will grab Tkachuk's stick for a half second to move it, and Tkachuk will drop the stick and go crying to the ref like, oh, he took my stick, look what he did. No, Tkachuk, you're a big baby. Right now, you look like the face of this team. Congratulations, you made me hate Ottawa. March 5th, 2004, the Fight Fest. This was an interesting game. So the Flyers played the Senators, of course, and there were so many fights in this game. You can watch a replay cap of the game on YouTube. Oh my gosh, to tell you how crazy it was, 419 penalty minutes were called in that game. What does that tell you right there? At the end of that game, I think it was something like 3 players were left on the Flyers bench and 2 players on the Senators bench. Just everyone was fighting right off the bat. So it's not necessarily a thing I hate about the Senators, but it's just something that sticks out to me as, wow. Nickname of Senators. Why do you got to be called the Ottawa Senators? I understand you're paying homage to the old Ottawa Senators, who've been around since the 1880s, I want to say, 1890s. But you guys didn't have hockey for years, for like 40, 50, 60 years. You could have come up with a better name than Senators. It's such a bland name. And then your mascot, your logo, I should say, isn't much better. So, lastly, the 2017 playoff loss. So, how it happened in double overtime, it's heartbreaking enough for the fans of the Senators. But, of course, the fact that it happened against the Penguins knocks a lot of points off for me. You guys know I can't stand the Penguins. The Penguins are disgusting. I despise them with everything, with all my being. But, of course, they were the ones that had to win. Of course, this started the mini dynasty where they'd win 2 consecutive cups. This was the first one against Nashville. If Ottawa had won that game, Pittsburgh wouldn't have made the Stanley Cup. So, it just really upsets me. Now the tough part, saying one good thing about each team. Ottawa Senators. I mean, there's not a lot of good to say about this team. I mean, you do at least pay homage to some of the older players. And you did retire the number of the last alive member of the original Ottawa Senators, so I have to give you respect for that. Tampa Bay Lightning. I like Steven Stamkos, and I like Victor Hedman. So, I mean, yeah. And then you had Ryan Callahan. Ryan Callahan's a guy I was a big fan of as well. Of course, Callahan's career ended there, but Toronto Maple Leafs, there's really not too much positive things to say about the Toronto Maple Leafs. You guys know Buffalo is one of my favorite teams. You guys know Montreal is one of my favorite teams. So Toronto doesn't mix well with either of them. I mean, you've had some interesting players in your history, and you guys are a good running joke. That's probably the best thing I can say about Toronto. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. This was the Atlantic Division of the NHL Part 1. Have a good rest of your day.